Do not call me anymore. It's none of my business. How am I supposed to record a lecture for the students now? Feeling completely broken. Oh, I'm gonna go nuts if I don't take my pills. Fuck. Where are my meds? Alright. Now I can go get the camera. This place is starting to look like a garbage dump rather than a storage room. Those are propane and butane gas bottles. Well, I hope I won't forget to press the record button this time. Let's move on straight to our deceased. I'm wondering how the new tripod is going to work. Just frame it properly and... Oh, this should be fine. November 21st, 1991. Time, 8:43 p.m. Recording for medic... Well, who do we have here today? Found on the outskirts of a parking lot near a gas station, the deceased is locally known as Old Tope. Mentioned the rookie mistake. The body was found at 7 o'clock by Sheriff Matthew Thompson. Oh, where are the damn gloves? Now we can get to work. We're going to need the camera. It should be here somewhere. Oh, must have left it in one of the drawers. Let's follow the procedure and prepare photo documentation. We must follow the top-down rule. Luckily, we don't have to take pictures of the clothes this time. We are only focusing on the body. Let's keep in mind it's all about the legibility, not the perfect frame. Voila! Now we move on to the next step. Trace search. We're going to need better zoom here. We're going to need better zoom here. We're going to need better zoom here. We're going to need better... More, and that's perfect. People affected by homelessness most often die from accidents, alcohol abuse, or they freeze to death. Unfortunately, both suicide and homicide are also quite common. Well, you don't have to stand close to be able to smell a strong odor of alcohol. And, While taking the photos, some entries that could be potentially lethal caught my attention. Let's take a closer look using the magnifying glass. By the look of his feet, I assume Toby must have worn uncomfortable and dinky shoes for quite a while. However, such wounds have nothing to do with his death. There are frostbite marks all over the deceased's body, although they are most visible on the tips of his fingers. They can be recognized by the very specific color of the skin. However, the hands tell us much more. An old wound that hadn't healed properly. It must have been some kind of burn or other injury. Nevertheless, it has nothing to do with the potential cause of death. That's something interesting. While making photographic documentation, ecchymosis can be seen on the deceased man's head. The appearance indicates the intravital nature of the wound. We'll come back later to see if everything is all right with the brain. What do we have here? An old wound that, by the look of his, it could be freeze. The condition of the, the odor can be the result of alcohol. At this point, that's all I can do based on all traces on the body of the deceased. Now let's check the level of muscle tension. This will allow us to establish time of death. Let's raise the deceased's hand. and then let go. The stronger the rigor mortis gets, the greater the resistance from the muscles will be. As you can see, the hand falls loose. The rigor mortis has already subsided. We can then assume that the time of death stated in the files is correct. Let's grab a scalpel. You can boldly cut with the scalpel. It won't hurt him no more. We always start with the neck and move down towards the symphysis pubis. The incision should be deep. Next, we separate the skin and prepare to remove the ribs. The adipose tissue has an intense yellow hue. As you've probably already guessed, we're going to need the scissors. After removing both cartilage and bone tissues, we are actually interested in two things that you can see at the very first glance. The lack of organ congestion means that, although the deceased was cold, hypothermia wasn't the cause of death. We can eliminate freezing as the cause of death. The deceased smoked like a chimney. Let's take a closer look. We see widespread black and tarry deposits caused by smoking cigarettes. Despite the tragic condition of the lungs, they are not the cause of death. Now we need to go grab the syringe. At this point, we prick the bladder and draw about 10 milliliters of fluid. We move on to collecting blood from the heart. 5 milliliters from the left ventricle should do it. We also collect the fluid from the deceased to determine the level of alcohol concentration in the vitreous. Keep in mind that you have to set the right time and speed on both knobs before running the centrifuge. Our samples may break into pieces due to the centrifugal force if we set up the wrong coordinates. I myself am terrible with numbers because I suffer from dyscalculia. Damn it. If something goes to shit, it's all the way. That's probably the blown fuses again. Hold up, I must have had a flashlight somewhere. And I was hoping to clock out early today. What was that? Where did it go? Yeah, it's definitely the fuses. Right goes first, left next. Voila! Where's that unbearable noise coming from? Alright, let's see what where were we? Well, everything is telling us that the BAC, blood alcohol concentration, is high, hence the smell we're getting from the deceased. Still, to be 100% sure, I have to send the samples to the lab. Unfortunately, now let's take a closer look at the stomach. As expected, the stomach has no major external damage. In this case, further inspection is no use. We must cut him open. That's interesting. In addition to a large amount of gas and liquid, the stomach also contains small amounts of yellow-grayish food. Oh, it couldn't have been suffocation, could it? Now we need to focus on the cardiovascular system, especially the heart. Could that be suffocation? At first glance, the heart looks fine. The pulmonary trunk and aorta seem to be in good condition. There are no pathological changes that have contributed to our Toby's death. Well, once we've got the body ticked off, we can move on to the head. Let's take the autopsy saw to cut through the skull to cleave it in two. Remember, the skull, not the saw. Anyway, we will start dissecting the brain from the occipital lobe. In this way, the brain's dura mater is slowly revealing itself. After the basic examination, we can see that the cerebral gyri in both brain hemispheres are symmetric, and the bumps between them are clear. So far, so good. The hematoma seems to have it. Holding a knife with a long, narrow blade in your dominant hand, cut the cranial nerves on both sides, pulling the brain towards you. Remember, just one small fragment examined under the magnifying glass is enough to dispel or confirm our doubts. We then take the fragment of the brain to the tray and, literally and figuratively, go over it with a fine-tooth comb. Just as I initially suspected, we can rule the fatal accident out as well. We now come to the deceased's neck. Same as we did with the stomach. While cutting a small organ, such as the trachea, we must perform a precise incision. To be able to cut with the very tip, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've got it. Based on the report and preliminary documentation, it is safe to assume that and now it's all clear. The death was caused by suffocation. It went quite smoothly today. I'm about to get off. In order to bring the chest of our deceased back to its initial state, at least to a small extent, we sewed the deceased using the baseball stitch technique. This stitching method is very strong and quick to do. I should probably get to that. I'm coming. This is Dr. Jack Hanman. Please leave a message.
Good evening. How are you?
What the f is that supposed to be? I'll finish the stitching and I'm getting the fuck out of here. What the fuck?